So we've got all these antiquated mythologies and belief systems that keep us trapped and putting our nose down to things that aren't important, while people that have a lot of money and power play dangerous games
to keep their money and power.
To keep their money and power and keep us pacified with fancy phones and technologies that are brainwashing us into spending money we don't have and living in ways that are not healthy for the planet or each other.
Hey everyone, this is Catalin, and today's guest is Paul Chek. He's the founder of the Chek Institute, who's teaching people worldwide how to basically have a holistic approach to their health and life. And I've been training with one of his practitioners for the last 3 years, who was also my karate teacher, funnily enough, and he has been of instrumental value to the way I currently see the world, especially that I'm, let's say, attracted to this multidisciplinary approach to finding solutions to things. So I'm really grateful to his work, especially to his book, How to Eat, Move and Be Healthy, that basically allowed me to have the energy to do all the things I'm doing currently, and allowed me to channel my energy in a good direction, or so I hope I am. And we talked a lot. We went, and I was just talking about this with my team, we went for 2.5 hours, which was not scheduled to happen, but it did. So I think it's a really, really solid discussion that a lot of people will benefit from. We did talk about from where the world is going, to health, to specific things that people can improve in their lives, to how people can find their dream and find the energy to go out and contribute to the world at a time that it's especially important for all of us to do so together. So I hope you enjoy the conversation, and let me know your thoughts in the comments or reviews and whatnot, and I looking forward to hearing your responses. Thank you so much. So Paul, why don't you, maybe because this is obviously filled with art everywhere, and I was just appreciating one of those, and we're gonna get to that soon, but when did you start to come up with these?
Well, I took a course from quite a famous shaman named Rowena Kreider in around 2004, I would guess, early 2000s. It's been so long, it's hard to remember. But she was a very unique woman. She had probably 5 master's degrees and even multiple PhDs. She was an expert at math. She was a music expert and music teacher. She was a highly, highly skilled shaman. She was an artist. She was an expert at the I Ching and wrote a big book on the I Ching. She was an expert at building. She built her own homes, her own teepee. She lived on Mount Shasta for 7 years doing world healing and working with people that came to her. The level of knowledge and skill in this woman was like almost not human, and it was very real because I'd studied her work and read many of her books. So she offered I think it was a 6 or 7 day course on the 9 Egyptian light bodies. And in that course, we were asked to do a mandala, which is a piece of art inside of a circle. And in this case, she didn't give us a specific heading. Usually when I say, if I have a heart patient, someone with cardiac disease, for example, I might have them do a mandala titled My Heart, and I have them focus on their heart and whatever they feel in their heart and paint or draw whatever comes out of them. So I just went into sort of an emptiness, a state of meditation, and let whatever came out. And each of us in the class, of which there was probably 15 or 20 people, did that. And then she would look at the art and interpret it and ask us key questions. And I found it mind-blowing what she could see and perceive in the art. And I also hadn't done any art since I was a child, other than technical drawings for my inventions and small sketches for things I was developing. And I felt so in touch with the child in me. And it was as though a part of me that had been stuffed down, repressed due to the intensity of work and life, was breathing again. And it just opened a flow valve. And since that day, I just started doing them almost nonstop. In fact, for years, my evening practice was I would sit and just do a mandala. And I found that when I was under a lot of travel stress and work stress, that just drawing with colored pens, pencils, or various medium would have a very powerful healing and stabilizing effect on me. So now I probably have somewhere in the neighborhood of 70 to 100 art books full of mandalas. And then probably about, I don't know, maybe 6 or 8 years ago, I just became attracted to acrylic painting because it's easy to work with, it's water soluble. And I started painting, and I found the intensity of the color was much more therapeutic than colored pencils or colored pens or watercolors. And I began studying art therapy and reading art therapy. I'd been studying Jung's work for over probably 20, 25 years now. So I studied all of Jung's work, and he really pioneered art therapy. But then I studied many other famous art therapists. And after years of study, I developed my own system of assessment so that I could begin integrating my own knowledge and wisdom from my own life experience into my clinical practice, working with people. And I found it mind-blowing, and they found it mind-blowing. And in fact, some people would be moved.
Leading people by their art.
Yes, so I would deal with them, because a lot of people get very trapped in themselves, and they can't access their pain or their fears or their deepest desires. And I found that the art has the ability to escape the control function of the ego and even the fear biases. The hardest thing you got to deal with is getting people to draw something. That's the biggest challenge. And the harder it is, the more they need it, paradoxically. Just like the harder it is for someone to exercise, usually the more they need exercise. And the experiences, some of my initial clients were cardiac patients, and they're notoriously tough patients because they've buried so much of their childhood pain and their relationship pain, which is then manifesting as cardiac disease and high blood pressure and all sorts of relevant things. But I found a lot of these people I'd already been coaching, sometimes for as much as a year or two, and it was really hard to move them forward because they were very resistant to anything that required them to look inside. But when I started applying art therapy, it was as though someone took the cap off of an artesian well and out it would come. And then when I would finish my analysis with them, which can take as much as 20 hours, when I do the analysis, I connect to their soul, and I connect to the art through my own soul, and then I ask their soul to guide me so that, like, say I might see something that looks like a tiger or a tiger. And so there's many symbolic meanings for a tiger, but that's like reading a horoscope. You're not really getting your own interpretation. So when I connect to that person's soul, working as a shaman, I ask their soul, what does this tiger mean in regards to their life and to their situation? And then I have a principle that I teach called ask, don't tell. I don't diagnose. So then their soul might say, ask them about their incessant need to constantly hunt down projects to make more and more money when they already have lots of money, for example. So what happens is I would let the questions that would arise from an analysis of the art lead the therapy, and it would go right into the issues, bullseye. And I would make a habit of saying, how accurate do you feel the art assessment was? And even from the most hardened people, I would usually hear something like bang on or 100% or it's so accurate, it's scary. And that inspired me to keep studying and to keep practicing. And now, this has been many years now, so it's been hundreds and hundreds of mandalas and patients. And so it's such an important part of my work for helping people heal, but it's also one of the vehicles I found to be most therapeutic for my own healing. But beyond my own healing, it's a very potent form of meditation, and it's a spiritual practice for me because, you know, one of the most challenging things for all of us is to make the journey from our head to our heart. And the ego lives in the head, and it's an illusory construct that's largely built by other people's ideas. So our life is often full of pain and challenges that are confusing to us, and we don't know why we keep doing things that get us in trouble and in pain. But when we learn to let our soul guide us, or our higher self guide us, then we have to come down into the domain of the heart, which is the center of integration and feeling for our whole psychoenergetic system. And so when I'm painting, I found that if I just sat down with a canvas and had no plan and just emptied myself and asked my soul for an image that would be something that would either be healing or something that would inspire me or whatever wanted to come out, I would begin to get visions. So I might see a horse with wings, or I might see a mountainscape with a waterfall, or any number of things. And then I would start painting, and it was as though something was moving my brush. And I would paint things like I did this one right here, because one of my patients who was having a real challenge with endometriosis and was facing a hysterectomy, and all of the women in her family actually all had endometriosis, and all of them had been told by a surgeon that they needed to have have a hysterectomy. And she came from a family of vegetarians, and part of her journey was I had to get her to eat meat again, which caused a huge ruckus in the family and went against their religious beliefs. But she had a lot of unconscious drivers that she was not able to access. So I asked her to do an art exercise, and she could not do it. She could not put the pencil or the pen or the color to canvas. She just went into gridlock. So I said to her, I will do it with you. So I actually did her art exercise.
Like moved her hand?
No,
I
did the same exercise. So she was doing it at home in another state, but I was just saying, I'll do it with you so you know that I'm also doing it. It's kind of like if you have somebody in a house that's gluten intolerant, but everybody else is eating gluten, or if you have an alcoholic that's trying to get off alcohol,
acceptance. Mm-hmm.
And people keep drinking, it's almost impossible to get off of it. So knowing that if I was doing it with her, then she would feel she had company in it, I painted that, which is exactly the same exercise I was asking her to do. And then all of a sudden, because I was painting, she opened up and she painted hers.
Wow.
So I kept that as a record for her to show her what happened when I connected to her, and then painted with her presence inside of me. So it basically became fun because she could see what happened when I did her exercise, and then she was able to compare hers to mine. But there's an example of me sitting down and just letting it come through me while putting my awareness on her. And then symbolically, there's loads of stuff in there, you know. So when I analyzed it and then analyzed hers, they were saying the same kinds of things. So it basically allowed her to feel that she was, instead of riding a bicycle alone, like a little girl afraid to ride a bike, it was more like daddy's at the front and you just get on the back and pedal with me. And since I'm already riding, you don't have to worry about falling off. So that is an example of how that one came about. That one's the first year I was up here at the Heaven House, and I painted that.
And and we're going to walk around and I'll ask you about some of those. But one thing I was specifically thinking about this, I think I've done my second, I don't paint, I just used colored pens. I think that's their name.
Yeah.
I do that because it's just easier, so I can start getting in the habit of it. And the way I use it is whenever I get a feeling I don't know how to deal with it, I visualize it out, or I'm also a dancer, so I dance it out. Would you say like that's how you did it, or you had like a habit every day? Like, were there emotions to express that were laying in there, or you did that out of a habit anyways?
You
Because
mean
you had
in my own personal art?
yeah, like for you.
Well, once I went to Rowena Kreider's training and had the experience of doing it, it was as though somebody unlocked something.
So there was a
inside of
lot
me.
there to express.
It was as though my unconscious was loaded,
Yeah.
but it had not found a way to express itself that could convey information back to me. For example, I can go express myself through movement, but you don't have a record of it. You could film it if you wanted to, but then you're still open to a very subjective interpretation. In other words, if you asked me to dance out my pain, even as a dancer, you would have to make a very subjective evaluation of that. And without me present, it would be a guess.
But
with art, because you capture the experience and it deals with symbology, and symbols, by definition, connect you to something beyond themselves. So, for example, that piece of art is a symbol in alchemy of the union of the male and the female within the psyche to create the experience of oneness or unity with God or unity with all that is. So that basically is a symbol that I painted, which is the intention of my practice of alchemy each day, is to balance the male and the female. And that's also a meditation piece. You can use that by sitting and relaxing and just emptying your mind. It will open your psyche up and it'll take you to the place that it's symbolically connected to, which is the union of the male and the female, which is what people are trying to do all the time in meditation and the use of psychedelic drugs and shamanism. Yep. So that's how that works. So, you know, like if you look at this painting, there's loads of symbols in there. And oftentimes the artists themselves are not trained in symbol interpretation.
Yep.
So they don't even know what they're painting.
Which is great.
It's great.
Yeah.
It's great, but at the same time, if they knew what they were painting, or they knew how to read it, they would also learn a lot more about what's coming through them, because artists are some of the chief vehicles by which a new mythology enters into a culture. But many of the artists themselves only know the idea or the feelings they have, but only when someone skilled in analysis, like a Jungian analyst or someone like myself, looks at it and explains to them what they painted, because I've worked with many artists.
Then they're shocked.
Then they're going, oh my God, I had no idea. But sometimes these paintings can be radically transforming. And the other thing is that when you use art, anybody that looks at it, so if you look at that painting, even though I painted it for myself, because your psyche, beyond your ego, already has an intimate knowledge of the meaning of those colors, and it reads the vibration, because color is vibration, that's a form of energy and information. So that's actually talking to your psyche.
Yeah.
And just by looking at a piece of art, anything in you that isn't healed, that correlates to the vibration, the energy, and the information in there, can get unlocked.
Ooh.
So you can actually heal by sharing your own art and your own pain, because most of us have common themes of our pain, such as mommy problems, daddy problems, money problems, relationship problems. So anytime one of us unlocks something inside of ourselves, if someone else with the same problem sees the art, it actually works on them as energy medicine.
And this is, funnily enough, because one of the things that people do and they have no idea why is they just, like, tens of millions of people visit Italy and Paris and all these museums and great art, and they actually don't, if you ask them, like, hey, why are you looking, why have you spent $4,000 to come watch? Like,
Yeah.
well, I don't know, but it's just great.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting to see like that going on, and people not knowing why they're doing that.
And that's why people buy certain pieces of art. For some, they might find that very unattractive and uninteresting.
Yeah.
But somebody, maybe one of their children or one of their friends, can't stop looking at it. It's like it's got a magnetic effect on them. And that's because each of our psyches has different needs, and we express those different needs in the colors we wear, the choices we make, the cars we drive. We're constantly projecting our own consciousness into the environment.
Would you say, so you said that artists are the ones that are, well, I'm going to paraphrase, so they're at the edge of the known and unknown, and they're kind of bringing knowledge to us.
They're carrying the myths. They're carrying us.
They're the closest to.
They're the closest. Basically, if you think of, if you think of the fact that we're all co-creating life together on Earth, we have some bad habits collectively, such as destroying nature and abusing each other, and racial and ethnic differences that lead to war and torture and things like that. All behaviors are the products of beliefs, right? Christians have certain beliefs that exclude Muslims, and Muslims have beliefs that exclude Christians, and vice versa, and this is kind of common, especially in the Abrahamic religions.
Yep.
And so in our culture, we do things not even knowing that we're living out the belief systems of our parents, our grandparents, and our great-grandparents for generations, because they're actually steeped in a mythology. All religious documents really are expressions of mythology. The Bible is really a mythological story. That doesn't mean that that doesn't necessarily mean it's not true, because there can be mythological statements.
Abstraction.
Was that?
It's an abstraction? Maybe?
Well, it can be a statement of truth, but it can also be something that's equally mythological, meaning it's got a truth that's beyond the stated facts. Okay, so in other words, did God create the world in 6 days and rest on the seventh day? Well, scientifically, no. But mythologically, we don't know how long those days were. We think of a day as 24 hours. But a day on Mars may not be 24 hours, and a day on the sun is forever, because there's nothing to cast a shadow on it.
Yeah.
So when you look at it mythologically, then you find that there's actually all sorts of other information coded in there. And artists are people that are accessing the probabilities. In other words, we're moving in this direction, and if we keep going that way, we're going to destroy ourselves. Therefore, the artist is a potential vehicle, like an antenna, that is picking up information which could come from God, it could come from other planetary systems, it could come from other solar systems, it could come from beings that are more evolved than us, that have evolved out of the Earth plane. It can come from beings that are no longer in need of a body, but are conscious entities in and of themselves, which you see many channeled books like Seth and Abraham and things, that those are conscious entities, or the Law of One series by Ra. There's a myriad of those types of examples. Or you see people like, the seers and the prophets. I'm trying to remember the name of the one from Egypt or from Greece. I'm just brain farting right now. But anyhow, these are the people that are accessing other dimensions, and whatever their intention is. So if their intention is to help people, they're going to access information that's in line with their intention. And to the degree that they're open and receptive, then what they carry through becomes extremely powerful, because it touches us at the psychic level. And that can shift us into all of a sudden perceiving things in a new way that we didn't perceive until we looked at the art. The other ones that do this are poets. So the artists and the poets are the two.
When you say artist,
yeah.
But like, what are the channels you mean? Painting, sketching, sculpting.
Mostly,
so what do you mean by artist?
Well, all of them can contribute, but you look at someone like Michelangelo or Leonardo da Vinci, they use many mediums, and all of them were potential means of channeling information, from sculpture to...
So writing too, and all of that.
So but mostly the art that has the greatest impact on people is
visual.
Painted, because you can take pictures of it and reproduce it in magazines, and you could put 100 sculptures in a piece of art, but you'd have a hard time making 100 sculptures and putting them all in one picture. So and also the psyche, the mind thinks in images. The human mind's an image processor, and language describes the images that we have, and research shows that children are seeing images before they can describe them with language. And there's great research on how the mind processes information in images. So whenever we're using imagery, then we're tapping into the psyche at a level that's even pre-linguistic, but we're also tapping into something that is linked to the collective consciousness of humanity. And we're tapping into a field that carries the information and the experience of every living being on the planet. So for example, as an example of that, I don't know if you've studied Ram Dass at all, but
he just passed away 1 week ago, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, he did. And when Ram Dass was studying with his master, one of the tasks that him and his fellow students were given is to chant Om, and they did this for hours a day. And they did it for months at a time, and all of a sudden Ram Dass, while he was walking around, even when he was trying to sleep, would just keep hearing Om inside of him. It was as though millions of people were chanting Om, and it was kind of strange for him because he wasn't saying anything, and he was like, where is this coming from? So he went to his master and he said to his master, why do I keep hearing other people chanting Om? He says, it's like I'm hearing a myriad of people chanting. And he said, because when you use that vibration, it taps you into the vibration of every person that's ever chanted Om on this planet for as long as it's been happening. And now you're contributing to the collective unconscious, and you've harmonized yourself to the frequency of all the people chanting Om. And so now he had opened his psyche enough that he was actually in a feedback loop with the memory of the planet, or if you want to go deeper, the Akashic record, which is the memory system of the whole universe, which is well explained in quantum physics. I won't go down that road because it'll be too much. But
yeah. And would you say that, because you mentioned this, would you say, like I said, most artists, they do this, but they don't know what they're doing and how to explain it, but they still do it.
Some do, not all of them. Some do.
So would you say it's of very, like, how valuable is for artists, especially like visual artists that you displayed, to actually start to understand symbolism and all these things? Like, they would be able to pass on the knowledge, or how would, like, what is?
Well, it's very important, and almost all the most advanced artists that do that kind of work do, like Alex Gray we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
He would be an expert at symbol. I know he is, because I've studied his material and listened to lots of interviews with him. So someone like that has a much broader language. You know, a picture's worth 1,000 words as a metaphor. So when you're looking at an image, it can flood your mind with far more. You know, you might have to listen to 100 hours on audio to get what an image conveys into you in 1 second.
Because it's fast processing.
Well, because the image is containing symbological meanings that are so vast and so deep that, you know, like if I showed you a picture of the sun, I could give you a 3-hour discussion just on the different meanings of the sun.
Wow, that's, yeah.
So if you study, and also then you have cultural differences. The sun, what does the sun mean in Egypt? What does the sun mean in China? What does the sun mean in the United States? What does the sun mean in Denmark? What does the sun mean all over the world? It'll have similar things, but there'll be culturally different things as well. For example, if you show a symbol of the lingam and the yoni, or the sex organs in India, well, people walk around naked there all the time, so people have no inhibitions to that. But if you did a painting of the sex organs, or a penis penetrating a vagina, and you published it in the United States, you'd have the Christians going crazy over it because they've repressed all that. And we're raised with all this puritanical beliefs and fear of nudity. So the same symbol in the United States would have a very different effect on the psyche as it would in India, because their conditioning is very free of all that baggage.
Yeah. So can you, so we can move around a bit, but can you, I think that's very fascinating. We should talk about that maybe. Can you share the story of, because you said you do a mandala every year?
Every year, yeah.
Can you walk us through your...
Yeah, why don't we get closer to it, though, because it's easier for me to point things out.
Yep.
So each year, to start my year, usually around Christmas time, I go into meditation and I ask my soul to guide me to what I should paint in a mandala to symbolize and contain or embody the energy and the information that will guide me with the intention of living my dream most fully. So then once I go into meditation, and sometimes it takes me weeks to finally get the image. Sometimes I'll use plant medicines to open the gates more thoroughly and make contact easier depending on what's going on in my life in various circumstances. But typically I do it in the sauna. That's where I do most of my meditation. But I just ask my soul, please give me images. Sometimes I get fragments of it. Like I might get one image, but I sense that it's not complete. So I'll ask my soul, is there more? Yes. And then I'll just keep going and I'll sketch it out until I get this sense of, okay, I know what I'm supposed to paint. And then when I sit down and paint, all of a sudden more starts to come because it basically starts painting itself. And when I say that, I don't mean the art's not painting itself, but spirit or soul is moving more information through me. When I'm aligned to the symbols that I've already painted, it opens the gates to the rest of the message. Okay? So what I do is I paint that, and because I know what the symbols mean, when I'm doing it, I don't try to interpret it because then the ego can get involved. So for example, if I paint something that might have a negative connotation, the ego's urges to change that and get rid of it. But then you block yourself from receiving wisdom that might be very essential to your own growth and development and to your relationships and everything involved in your life. So when I paint, I just let whatever comes out come out. But because I know the symbols, I also tend to know what they're suggesting as I'm painting them. Once I finish, now the next thing I'll do, because I just recently finished that, I'll take a day off and I'll use that as a meditation focus, and I will go into meditation and connect to my soul, and I will focus on each of the key components, and I will take the notes that I'm given as to what to be aware of, but I will also do a ceremony where I go into it specifically to let it give me visions, and then and it's already started giving me visions. For example, we've been hunting for a new house to put our business and our home on for 3 years now, and just recently Penny and Angie found a perfect place for us, and as they were leaving the place and they came to the gate had a huge metal mandala that an artist had done out of metal, and in the center of it was a sun, and it had feathers shooting out from all directions, and there you see a sun, and the feathers are actually projected from the center point of the sun. And so the instant that Angie texted me the picture of that, I said, oh my God, that's my mandala, and they both recognized it immediately when they saw the gate because they'd seen my mandala. So you see, there's an example of how my soul is giving me clues so that I know when I'm looking at the right place to buy.
That's a pretty cool way to know what house to buy.
Yeah, and so the other thing is that this is how it works on many levels of our life, right? And so there's a lot in there, and there's also numerology in there. So using numerology. But you know, the symbol in the middle of the eye, that represents the divine eye. It also represents the third eye, but that symbol is an Egyptian symbol for the Merkaba, which is the soul, body, and the spirit. So that when you die, that's really what's left. So
where can people, because I guess, because we could talk about this forever, but where could people what are some resources maybe you recommend, or people could get a gist of symbolism and how to understand it?
There's many good dictionaries on symbolism. There's just countless numbers of them. I started my study by studying Jung's work. Now, Jung's work is very, very deep for most people without a background in psychotherapy or Jungian psychology to understand, but there's great books that are introductions to Jung. In his collected works, he's got large sections of analysis of symbols, symbols and what they mean. Most any good book on art therapy has symbolic interpretation in it, and there's mountains of books now on art therapy that are very scientific and very good. I have probably 40 of them in my library, if not more. But that's a good place to start.
Yeah, and you do everything. So this is your office, and you do everything here, like in this home? You don't move around too much.
Well,
You're at the gym
I
outside,
lived on airplanes for 20 years, but when I was 50,
which must have been a lot of pain.
well, yeah, I went through a midlife crisis at 50, and I just completely burned out from just being so ungrounded and constantly being in other countries and other cities and hotel rooms. And
Yeah.
just, it was very, very stressful. My body reached the breaking point where no matter how good I ate or how much Tai Chi and meditation I did, I was just so ungrounded. I sensed that if I kept going, I was probably going to get a disease or something. So then I just, at risk of collapsing the whole business, because that was before.
This was not 90 something or 2000 something?
About 2006. But
2006.
That was before, internet education was at all popular, before podcasts were at all popular.
So all of your activity was you being.
Yes, I had to be on stage, and there was a direct correlation to how much time I spent on stage and how well the business did.
Yeah.
But for my own health, I had to stop doing that. And part of what I had to do was paint a lot more to move the pain out of me so I could work with it. And so that's also when I decided I couldn't be in a corporate environment and went into meditation, and my soul said, get yourself a place where you can be out in nature and be with animals. And so I just worked on what I needed, and it took me a month with my soul's help to find this place. And so this is my 8th year here, and this really became the medicine for my soul, but it also became medicine for countless numbers of my clients from all over the world that come here for sometimes anywhere from typically 3 days is the normal visit, but up to a week. I've had people come stay with me for 3 weeks at a time.
Wow.
For deep healing work. But I get them off the grid, so to speak, and out here in nature, and we got bobcats and deer and coyotes.
And ground them.
It's very wild out here, and they can walk out and meditate out in nature and exercise out in nature and paint outside if they want to, or inside, whatever they want. But this was part of my own healing. So this house is really, this land, we have 8 acres here, is a form of medicine for me.
Yeah.
And it just turns out to be what most people need, is more time in nature and to disconnect from the kind of the chronic buzz of the world of electronics and constantly chasing money and all those things.
So, Paul, like I told you when we were in the kitchen, a lot of people that are watching are, let's say, on their path to make a contribution of some sorts. They might be artists, they might be entrepreneurs, they might be people just developing their own thing. There might be people that are not doing that yet, but they feel they should or they would, or things of that nature. And what I thought might be a good way to start a conversation is, from my own personal experience, I feel when I look at these people and talk to them, and with me as well, I feel the motivation is the problem. That it's not how to do push-ups or how to, like, obviously your work with the Chek Institute does that very well. You give people personalized programs and everything and all of that, but people don't do them. They don't follow up on it. Mm-hmm. So it seems that the problem is people doing things, not the knowing what to do, and that's kind of a normal thing. So what would you say about that? Is that, because I'm thinking, what's the root causal problem you could solve that will then allow you to be able to do everything else, whatever that could be? A business, could be getting in shape, could be raising your kids. What do you think about that?
Well, it's a complex question because there's more than one issue at hand. First of all, you have no free will until you've healed your own programming. So however your parents, who are your chief programmers, live, whatever their beliefs are for better or worse, whatever their habits are for better or worse. For example, it's very clearly shown in medicine that if you come from a family where there's a history of alcoholism, your incidence of alcoholic tendencies is very high. If you come from drug addicts, it's high. If you come from workaholics, you're likely to be a workaholic. If you come from people that have a history of depression, you're likely to deal with depression, because it's being transferred not only through the genetics, which research currently shows it goes back for sure 3 generations and as much as 14 generations. So to the degree that living your parents' lives is not fulfilling to you, then your task is to begin the healing process of identifying what of mom and dad's teachings is useful to you, because it, for example, maybe they're good at managing money. That's a great skill to keep. but maybe they have a hairy time with each other, hard time getting along with each other, and they fight over silly things. If you carry that into your relationships, you're going to find a lot of your life force energy is consumed by argumentative practices, though managing money may not be a problem for you. With a guy next door, they get along really well with their partner, but they can't manage money, so they always have money problems, and their parents had money management problems. So the first, one of the first things we've got to do is, in my system, I teach a 4-step system. 1, what is your dream? What do you love enough to change for? I tell people, if you have a big enough dream, you don't need a crisis, which is a comment from psychologist Jerry Wesh that I use because it's very true. So often people do the work of figuring out what they do love enough to change for, but then they repeatedly run into the obstacles of their unconscious behaviors, making excuses about why they don't have time to exercise or why they haven't had time to go get the food they need or the supplements they need, and a long list of things. But when I analyze them using the system of analysis I've developed, which has a lot of Jungian influence on it, and I look at their program beliefs and their traumas, it's clear that they're still acting out their program behavior. So if a person doesn't have enough sense of direction, like I want to accomplish X, I want to get in shape for, I want to lose weight because, I want to climb Mount Kilimanjaro or compete in this triathlon or get ready for my college reunion, then they have no reason to channel their intention and their awareness and their energy into a specific activity. And as the old saying goes, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. So they're just all over the place. So when I work with people, what I do is I first identify the dream. Second, I do an analysis on them. So step 2 is there's only 2 forces that create the whole universe, the feminine and the masculine. So the feminine is the feminine principle of nurture, connection, holding the family together, loving guidance, and more of a feeling-based relationship, where the masculine principle is the principle of getting something done, fighting for what you believe in, rational, logical approaches, kicking the kids out of the house and getting them out into the world so you can have sex without kids listening, and whatever else. The masculine principle is projective, or yang in Taoist philosophy. It means it expresses itself outward and it divides energy. So all the activities that you do every day divide the energy that you have. If you open a computer, turn a computer on, every time you open another window, you now are doing the same thing as having another personality, and each one of those is drawing power off the power source. So if you run a computer with 14 windows open, it'll burn the battery up far faster than a computer with 1. So what I'm saying is that when I do the analysis, I look at people from a nutritional perspective. I look at, which is Dr. Diet in my system. I look at them from a movement perspective. I look at Dr. Happiness, or what are they doing or not doing to create happiness and well-being in their life. And I look at them from a Dr. Quiet perspective. How are they using the principles of rest? Those are the 4 key underpinnings that have to be present, or no one can be healthy. You cannot be a healthy 3-doctor person. You could have a dream, you could exercise well and eat well, but not rest effectively and burn yourself completely out. You could have a dream and rest well and eat well, but not move effectively and end up with a body that doesn't work well for you. So no matter how you slice it, as a therapist, I've identified that if a person does not have an adequate level of connection, awareness, understanding, and participation in happy making, movement, eating well, and resting well, then they will find themselves facing so much resistance to their own so-called dream, goal, or objective that they end up oftentimes suffering from non-completion, which is what you're talking about. Step 3 in my program in my system is 3 choices. There's only 3 choices we can make in relationship to any person, place, or thing. The optimal is the one that's best for you based on your dream plan, your goal or objective. And it's also best for everybody on your dream team, because anything that we can do that's of any significance can't be done alone. Even if you think, okay, my dream is to run a triathlon and I do all my training alone, I say, well, who built your bicycle? Who made the shoes you're wearing? Who made the toilet paper you use every day? Who cooked your food for you? So the first choice is the optimal choice, which is the best because it's the most efficient path to accomplishing your objective. The second choice is a suboptimal choice, and it usually gives instant gratification, but often causes problems on your dream team or subverts you from doing the things that you've committed yourself to doing. The third choice is do nothing, and it has 3 derivations. Doing nothing can be positive. If you're in an argument with someone and you're getting disconnected, then you can call a timeout and say, I'm having a hard time staying connected at the heart. I'd like to reconvene when I can add something meaningful to this conversation, and you should just walk away. Doing nothing is wise when you've got to make an important decision, but you don't have enough information, such as if you're going to buy a new car or a new house or something of significance, and you don't want to just take the salesman's word because they've got an agenda, which is to sell, or you've got to make a decision between vaccinating or not vaccinating, or circumcision or not circumcision, or any significant thing where you need more information, and you always have to look at both sides of the argument on, should I or should I not vaccinate? You have to look at the pro-vaccination argument and the non-vaccination argument, and only when you do that do you have a holistic view of what you need to know to make an effective decision. So that's the effective use of doing nothing. And the most dangerous one is to be apathetic and not care, because that's fairly close to the opposite of love. That means you've really given up on yourself, given up on others, and given up on life. So once I analyze what the dream goal or objective is and qualify that as to whether it's realistic or not, for example, if someone only made $20,000 last year and they set a goal for making $1 million this year, that's an unrealistic goal.
Is that a dream or goal?
Well, a dream is a carrier or a signifier that can be a dream, i.e. my dream is to climb that mountain, or it can be phrased as a goal and or an objective. But really it just means, what am I focusing my intention, my awareness, and my activity on?
Okay.
And so if you have the dream goal and objective, and then I look at the analysis of the individual and I can see where there's probably going to be problems, because I can identify addictions. In my system, an addiction is any repeated behavior that does not produce the results you want. Now that could be food, it could be sex, pornography, it could be video games, it could be workaholism, it could be exercise addiction, it could be drug addiction, alcohol addiction, it can be addiction to gossiping. There's an endless stream of ways that people get habituated to expressing themselves in ways that diminish their ability to actually achieve what part of them wants to do. So then we go to step 4. Once you know what your dream is, you know where you're out of balance, you know what choices you need to make in order to balance yourself so that you are clear and you're in harmony with the dream goal or objective. Then I help the person identify what is it that they need to do that is happy making, that keeps them in a state of being connected at the heart to their dream goal objective and the people supporting them. So there's Dr. Happiness. Each of the doctors has a physical, an emotional, and a mental level of activity. So what do you need to keep your body happy? What do you need to keep yourself emotionally connected and happy? And what do you need to fulfill your mental appetite for growth? What do you need to get moving physically, i.e. maybe more or less exercise, stretching, mobilization, whatever? What do you need to move stuck emotions? And what do you need to do to move your mind so that you're actually acquiring the knowledge and information that will get you to the stated dream goal or objective? What do you need to feed yourself, Dr. Diet, so your physical body is in a state of well-being? What do you need to feed on emotionally? What kind of people do you want to be around? Who are the people that have accomplished something like or have accomplished the dream goal or objective, because they will have the knowledge and the skills to inspire you? Who are positive people that you can be with that help you overcome your natural tendencies to not complete, for example? So there's emotional diet. You need to feed that emotional body. And then what do you need to feed on mentally to keep you stimulated, which that feeds into Dr. Happiness. And so then you have to rest your physical body, you have to rest your emotional body. For example, if you have people that you're in a relationship that you find very taxing to be around, you have to get clear within yourself how much time you can spend with that person before it's actually draining you emotionally and stopping you from being able to be emotionally available to meeting your own needs and desires and goals and objectives. And then you have to look at, as I said, mentally, but you have to rest your body. You have to rest in ways that feed your emotional needs, sometimes taking a time out from a challenging relationship or taking a time out from things that are pacifying, like watching television and playing video games, actually gets you back in touch with your own emotions. So sometimes I have to put people on a video game fast or a television fast, or, in other words, a natural break, so they can get a rest from something that's distracting. And then what do you need to rest your mind? Because many great scientists, inventors, and achievers have actually worked themselves to death mentally and burned their bodies out because they did not know how to rest their mind. And there we use the inner arts such as meditation, tai chi, qigong, painting, as we discussed, sand play. There's a myriad of ways to rest, but really the rational mind has to be counterbalanced by unrational activities. So the rational mind is always seeking an objective. And our culture is dangerously objective oriented, but there's no unbound play in there. So what happens is people burn themselves out going from objective to objective to objective. And so the counterbalance of that in my system is Dr. Quiet, and the way you do things. That's why I stack rocks, for example, because if they fall over, who gives a damn? It's just a pile of rocks. But while I'm out there doing it, I'm expressing my creativity, I'm expressing athleticism, I'm in touch with nature, I'm breathing fresh air, I'm in connection with the sun, and I'm actually doing something that has no outcome orientation to it. So, I know when I'm getting too attached to a painting because I either don't want to give it away or I couldn't light it on fire. So if I can't give it away or light it on fire, it means I'm painting for the wrong reason. Unless I'm a professional painter and that's what I do for a living, and then you'd still have to deal with all sorts of issues about judging your paintings and money and all that stuff. So that you see, what I'm sharing with you is that first you have to have a dream, goal, or objective, because you cannot get your compass bearing. You'll just
channel your energy somewhere.
You have to have, energy always follows awareness and intention, right? So you had to have the awareness of where you're going to get here, and you had to have the intention, or you could have just stopped at Disneyland and wouldn't have made it here.
Sure.
Okay, and that's an example of what people do. They find Disneyland on their phone and they never get any work done while somebody's paying them by the hour to get nothing done, and that's one of the big problems we have in the world today. So once you know what your dream is, you know where you're out of balance, and you can commit to being conscious of where those imbalances are now that a therapist or a coach has identified them for you, then you can make dream affirmative choices. So,
because you have a compass to judge against.
And you've been able to get the help of a skilled therapist to take what you may not even recognize as a habit or an imbalance, and it was unconscious. Now we bring it from the unconscious or the subjective into objective awareness. So you realize I'm not drinking enough water and I have a habit of drinking tea and coffee and juice instead of water. Well, that will not do what water does for the body. So all of a sudden you had no awareness that you were doing that. Now when you find yourself reaching for juice, tea, or coffee, but you know you haven't drank water, you can say, in order for me to accomplish my dream of losing weight or whatever it might be, I don't need juice or coffee right now, I need water. Because now you have an objective awareness of it. So now you're beginning to unlock the programming that your mother, your father, or your culture has, or that school teachers have imparted to you. And instead of doing what you've been programmed to do as a child or through other people's influence, you can consciously contribute to the creation of your own dream, goal, or objective. And now each time you make that contribution, you're expressing not only co-creativity with the universe as an agent of free will, but you're expressing your own free will. Until you can override your unconscious programming, you do not have free will. You're really just a chip off the old block,
autopilot,
as they say. You're on worse than autopilot, because people complain about autopilot all the time, and they get themselves in all sorts of health crisis, relationship crisis, and addictions from being on autopilot. and then run around expecting somebody else to fix them or take their problems away.
Would you say, because this sounds like a lot, would you say these are in some sort of sequential manner, that you can prioritize them in a way, like 1, 2, 3, 4, that's actually the priority?
That's how it has to be done.
Okay.
There's no other way around it, because how can you create free will for yourself if you have not analyzed where you're stuck or unconscious?
So that's the priority.
You have to know what you want to do, or you won't have the motive or the intention to spend the money or do the work to get the help to identify the imbalances, or even use self-help books and courses. Once you have the objective, then you know what you need to do, and then you have to identify what's in the way of accomplishing that, right?
Yeah.
If you want to build a new house and the area's got trees all over it, well, you have to get the trees out of the way so you can dig a foundation and build a house and build a driveway. So the first part, Tony Robbins and others say 80% of accomplishing anything is just knowing what you want to accomplish. Only 20% is making it happen. So there's many, many ways that I help people figure out what that is, because a lot of people simply just don't know. Just like I shared with you, my patient who had endometriosis could not get herself to paint. So I joined her in the exercise, but by joining her in the exercise, she felt like she had company and support. So emotionally, I helped open her up to the possibility that she could paint. And I said to her, look, I've never had an art lesson in my life. I showed her some of my earlier pieces of art that looked extremely stick figure and childish, and said, what you're seeing now that looks like an artist is actually the process of me engaging myself without attachment to the outcome. And it is a natural growth process. You spend enough time with a paintbrush in your hand, you get better at it. You spend enough time typing on a keyboard, you get good at it. You spend enough time exercising, you get better at it if you're doing it correctly. And so that's really the process, and then you have to make choices. And if you don't have those 4 doctors imbalances, you'll create more and more resistance every day to what you think you're trying to accomplish, not realizing that each of these 4 components is integral to how you spend your life force energy. And there's a finite amount of energy you can generate on any given day, unless you're a very advanced yogi.
Which is another podcast.
Maybe,
Yeah, so where do you think, as kind of a collective, we're having the most, like, where do people are stuck? Well, which one of those? I do feel it's number 1. I feel it's step number 1.
Well, collectively, where we're stuck is that we have a huge society and culture full of people in adult bodies that are actually operating at the psychic level of a child.
Okay.
Because we have been conditioned for a good 2,000 years to defer to authority, whether it be religious authority, the priest, to Jesus, to the doctor, to the school teacher, to the boss, to the person in the military with more rank than you. Your father is sort of the king of the household. Your mother's the queen of the household. If you even look at the history of chairs, you walk into a boardroom, what do you see at the end of each side of the table? A big chair. And what's along it? Little chairs. Why? Because that came from the Egyptian dynasty. The emperor and his wife, the empress, sat in the largest chairs. They were the first ones. They invented the chair, and everybody else that was subordinate sat on small chairs. And you go into houses all over the world and you'll see the same thing. So we actually have been conditioned not only through religion and through military structures and through plantation owners, which is where slavery, was, that we need to follow everybody else's dictates. And anybody that has more knowledge or is a scientist or a bigger degree than us becomes a parent figure. And so we've got a whole population worldwide of people now that can't think for themselves. They go to school and they're taught what to think, but they're never taught how to think. My system teaches you how to think for yourself. So you make your own decisions, which means you're an adult. So ultimately what we have is a bunch of people that are highly programmed by corporations to use video games when they should be working, to eat junk food even when it's making them fat and making them sick. But because it's all backed by science, they just believe it even though the evidence is completely contradictory to it. What does that mean? It means you have children deferring their power of creativity to an external authority figure that's only real because they've believed it's real. And until you actually become a warrior to stand up for your own values and your own beliefs, whether your parents agree with it or not, or society agrees with it or not, which is Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, then you're always going to be a victim to the programmers. And now programming is so elaborate and so evolved that your iPhone is a very powerful programming tool. And people don't realize, even though they outlawed subliminal programming on television many years ago, light has an infinite capacity to carry information, and they're brainwashing you constantly through the use of photographic images, through video technology and image technology, and they've got you hook, line, and sinker, and they're using artificial technology to track every of your tendencies and bait you constantly. And for example, if you read the book Hooked by Nir Eyal, it's completely demonstrated in there exactly how they do it, and I interviewed him on that topic. But until we actually learn to grow out of childhood into our warrior archetype and stand up for what we believe and get clear on what values are supportive of living the life we want to live, and what are the activities, goals, dreams, or objectives that we want to achieve for ourselves, and make that decision and take responsibility for saying no to the habits that we have and yes to acquiring the new skills, only then do we begin to be an adult. And if we're not an adult, then we're always in a subversive position or a submissive position.
Like the have to.
I have to, or it's not my fault, or someone else made me do it, or if I don't do it, I'll burn in hell, or my mom and dad will be upset at me, or the people in church will be upset at me because I am interested in Buddhism, so I have to keep that secret. That's all the position of a child. And an adult says, I choose to do, not I have to do.
Let me read you something on that note. Funny enough, I think it relates. So let me read you a quote. Let me know what you think of it. If you're intrigued by movie making as a career, this isn't the class for you, and I'll tell you where this is from. But if you need to make movies, if you feel that you can't rest until you've told a particular story that you're burning to tell, then I could be speaking to you. This is from masterclass.com, Martin Scorsese's class. It seems to me, let me know what your thoughts on that, that the first step could be to get in your awareness with maybe your soul, I don't know exactly what the word is for it, so you can have an implicit, like, bodily understanding of your dream, and then you can start expressing it, because that's, people are so out of, like, what is that first step before you can say what your dream is?
The first step is always follow your heart. The things that you love to do are the way your soul conveys to you the things that you should get better at, because they are components of what ultimately becomes your dream or your goal or your legacy. Your legacy is the overarching picture. My life legacy is the Chek Institute. But along the way, I learned many, many things, and I did many, many jobs, and some of them I may have been attracted to. I was a mechanic. I went to school to be a mechanic, and I also rebuilt engines, and I was a machinist, and so I was also a welder. I also worked in electronics. I worked in exploration and water well drilling. I worked in logging. I worked in farming. Those are just a few, but each one of those was attractive to me at a certain time, or was a means of making money, and of the means available, it was the one most attractive to me. But then I reached a point in my life where it was all of a sudden like an aha moment came, where I realized that as a therapist,
all of those were useful.
I can communicate to a plumber what's going on with their body in plumbing language, because I have experience with hydraulics and plumbing. I can communicate to an electrician what's going on in his body with electrical terms, because I have a background in electronics, and I repaired weapon systems on Cobra helicopters in the Army and did advanced electronics training and mathematics, because you have to have the math skills to do it. I can communicate to a farmer using farming analogies. So what happened was by following my natural impulse to do the things that felt best to me of the options available, that all of a sudden I realized there was a golden thread that was bringing me to all the experiences that ultimately led to me being an effective therapist and a coach and teacher, without which I would have only been able to deal in intellectual concepts that weren't grounded in reality. And this is why Jung says intellectualism is a common cover-up for fear of direct experience. Today we have people that are so conditioned to living on iPhones and in the tech world that they're actually completely out of touch with nature. They don't want to get dirty. They don't want to do real work, which would be kind of like wanting to be an artist or a sculptor without ever getting your hands dirty in the clay. And you think just because you read a bunch of books and you've watched a few programs on the internet, you can go get a job as a sculptor, yet you're going to be heartbroken when you don't get a job because you don't have any sculpting skills. You just have a bunch of ideas in your head. So what I'm saying is inside of us, there's a compass in the heart. Mm-hmm. And when we have choices, the choice that makes us feel most whole and most connected is the most important choice to make, even if it's not the most profitable, because that's where our awareness, our intention, and our energy flows most naturally. So the soul is like a flower. It begins as a seed, and it follows the light. And as the sun moves, the flower moves. So the light is really a metaphor for what's drawing you forward. But there's a lot of things to distract us. But if for example, a child at an early age has this obsession with video games, and mom and dad might think that's bad, you're not getting enough exercise or whatever, certainly they're going to want to give the child the things that the child needs to be a healthy child, such as time in the playground, time in nature. But to tell that child that its obsession with video games is bad when the child has a genuine love of video games is to not recognize that you've got the next Steve Jobs or Bill Gates on your hands. And they may invent not only video games for entertainment, but for healing or for business development or any number of things. So, you know, Arnold Mandel, a famous Jungian psychologist, shaman, and who developed his own system called process psychology, said that research shows that the dream that a child has for its life by 5 to 7 years of age is most likely to be, based on statistical analysis, what they will do for a living, provided the parents do not get in the way of it.
So would you say that the way your dream or maximum development manifests itself in the now in the form of interest, curiosity, and meaning, maybe?
It may be meaningful to you.
Like what word do you put on that? Because interest sounds like it's the word.
Well, there's a sense of willingness that emerges. For example, if I have a choice between working as a laborer on a construction site, working as a mechanic's assistant, or working as an assistant baker, or working in a factory that makes ropes, I would naturally gravitate toward the mechanic's assistant, because ultimately that could lead to being a full-fledged mechanic, which would give me the freedom to own my own shop, set my own hours, and do my own thing. But working at a bakery means you're up at 3:30 in the morning every day, and you're working with flour, and you're just making the same things over and over again. But as a mechanic, I could build my own race cars, which I did. And being a good mechanic also requires knowledge of electronics, it requires knowledge of hydraulics, it requires knowledge of internal combustion and other types of systems. It requires knowledge of machines, tools. So you see, for my psyche, for my soul, if I had a choice between the things that I just said, something inside of me gravitates towards starting off as a mechanic's assistant, and that's the voice that gets you progressively to the place where all of a sudden you realize you're becoming the person you came to the world to be.
And this is actually, funnily enough, obviously, is the topic of the book I just gave you. It talks about objectives and following curiosity and things like that. One of the things that it's maybe a challenge for this is because you can't see, and our world is built on objectives. Why do you want to do when you grow up? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Everything is, what is the outcome? Why are you doing it? Everything is like that.
Well, only on the people outside of you, not on the inside.
Yeah, so how can you, because when you're doing this, when you're letting your soul or your heart guide you as a compass to what you should do.
Yes.
It may not obviously make sense in the short term why you're doing that. It makes sense 15 steps along the way.
No.
So how can you develop that trust in yourself, or what is it that you should do?
That's what that's why I gave you the analogy I gave. I said of all the options, I would choose being a mechanic. If I needed to make money,
so just make a decision.
Make the decision that you feel most connected to. I tell people this.
Yeah.
Imagine you had just gotten arrested and you were going to be put in a maximum security prison for 30 years. But the rule in this prison is you have to have a job, and you can create any job you want. But once you tell them what you want to do, you have to do it for 30 years, 5 days a week. So I say, sit down and tell me what it is that you would do for 30 years and laugh all the time in jail going, oh my God, look at this. I love gardening and I get to garden every day and they think they've got me in prison and I'm happy as a clam. That's how you do it. So at any stage of your life, go back to the kid with the video games. If he says, I want to develop video games in jail for 30 years, he would just think it's funny. He wouldn't be stressed at all about being in jail.
Yeah.
But if you choose what someone else wants you to do or act out of fear, then you put yourself in jail for the rest of your life.
That's pretty badass. And the reason I'm asking that is it's so easy to fall back on what makes sense, what's a good objective. It's actually, if you don't see this, if you're not aware of this information, like, oh, maybe I shouldn't trust what I feel. That's kind of the default I've seen around. So that's why I asked that. Yeah.
There's times when you shouldn't trust what you feel.
Yeah. Well, that was a good distinction.
And so I'll tell you when you shouldn't trust what you feel. You shouldn't trust when you feel when your sex drive is about to get you in trouble because you're going to have sex with someone that doesn't want to have sex with you.
Okay.
Or you shouldn't trust what you feel when you feel like stealing something from somebody. So if you can't trust what you feel, that's when you need to be smart enough to go to somebody you trust to share what you're feeling. And that person should have enough life experience to be able to help you put into context and help you find meaning behind it.
And I think that's a good point to go on. How do you distinguish between that compass, which seems like a prerequisite to everything else, because then you can just go around your hero's journey and make things happen, and you'll have reasons to eat right and sleep well and all these things. How do you distinguish between, because people are also, they have conditioning, they're very undisciplined, a lot of them. So you have all this crap, and at the bottom of it, there's like the spirit and the heart telling you what you should do, but on top of it, you have laziness, and like you have all, so how do you know when to distinguish when you shouldn't trust your feeling and you should really just do what you should be doing? And like, can you distinguish between that?
Yes, if you're unable to trust your feelings because the options that are playing out is to keep doing something that hasn't worked before, then you can say, well, I have this feeling I should be playing video games, not getting my homework done. Well, then I would simply say, how has that worked for you so far?
How is your program working out?
How's that? Has it produced the results you want? Has it helped you be healthier and happier? Or has it become a distraction or a form of medication that numbs you so you don't have to deal with the challenges of becoming an adult and taking responsibility for yourself? So that's a key distinction. And as I said before, when you take the option or create the option, like, look, I have a 9th grade education and I lecture in medical schools and universities all over the world and in very elite environments. Well, the number of teachers that told me I wouldn't amount to anything in my life is very high. Well, they're very wrong, because I probably make more money than all of my teachers combined. And I have a very healthy, happy life, and I'm almost 60-year-old, and I can still outlift and outrun most professional athletes. So, how did I do that? I listened to the voice inside of myself, and I was honest with myself. And you can't get anywhere in life bullshitting yourself. That means you're still a child. So, there are addictions and there are distractions, but there's something deeper behind your query that I want to point out. Consciousness is a psychic substance. It's something tangible, produced not blindly, but in living awareness of opposites. When we come into the world, we're unconscious. research shows that for the first 7 years of a child's life, they're on full download mode, and most kids have no memory of what happened to them prior to about 6 years of age. Some people as early as 2, but most people can't give very accurate representations from memory of events prior to 6 years of age, because the mind is in an unconscious receptive mode, which is why we have to have parents. So what I'm saying to you is that things that pacify us, watching television too much pacifies you. Doing what everybody else is doing instead of what you know you want to do or should be doing pacifies you. Not having to work and take responsibility for yourself is a passive way to live your life. Those things that are pacifying are unconscious, but engaging ourselves and having the discipline to do the exercise, to climb the mountain, or to get the martial arts training to win the tournament, or to be a healthy enough woman to have a healthy baby, those things require that we become conscious of what's limiting us. And that is when we pay attention to what's stopping us from being that person or causing pain for us in our life and in our relationships. And the pain becomes the quickener of consciousness. And usually people that are unconscious actually don't have much freedom in their life because they're acting out the programming that was given to them under the radar of their own awareness.
Yeah.
The point I'm making is everything that you're describing is not something that you can just have a formula to get rid of. There's not an a squared plus b squared is c squared, but what there is the work of investigating and being honest with yourself. And if you cannot be honest with yourself, you will find yourself constantly living somebody else's life and being under somebody else's control, and you'll end up with a disease, and you'll end up with a body that doesn't work for you, and you might get lucky and end up as a patient of mine or a Chek trained professional that will analyze you, show you exactly how it happened and then what you can do about it. And then you have the choice to say, okay, now that I'm aware I'm acting out mommy and daddy's negative traits and society's negative traits, or I'm allowing myself to get addicted to video games even though they have advanced technology for doing that to me, now I know what's happening, and now I have to take the adult position of taking responsibility for myself, and that is the work of becoming a conscious individual. And you can't really contribute to the world or to the universe, if you will, as a co-contributor or a co-creator until you're conscious, because you're not acting out of free will. If you're painting somebody else's painting or someone else's idea,
it's not yours.
It's not yours.
Yep.
But when you're painting, as you see all over the house, your own dreams and your own inspirations and your own fantasies, then you're free and you're doing it for yourself. And if you practice doing the little things that have minimal consequences, like if you screw up a painting, who cares? If you fall off your bicycle, dust off and get back on. If you fall off the horse, even if you break an arm, you'll pay more attention next time, you'll be more conscious, you'll ride the horse better.
Yeah.
You know, I've got broken bones all through my body from my motocross racing exploits, rodeo riding, parachuting, you name it. But those things made me more aware of what not to do twice. So the point I'm making is all the things that you're talking about are the necessary forms of resistance that we have to work through to become a conscious co-creator in the universe and in the world, and to become aware of the power of our choices.
Yeah, that's powerful. I think the reason I asked a series of questions on that is that was my journey. I do remember when I was 9 or 10, I was eating maybe 2-3 chocolates at the time. I was very extreme personality. There was a lot of energy flowing through me for whatever reason. And I didn't have any problem eating 3-4 chocolates at a time, playing a lot of videos, doing all these things. But at 12, no, I think I read my first book at 12 or 13. And after that, I don't know exactly what happened, but it took me exactly 4 seconds to stop eating chocolate, start eat healthy, do all these things. So when I look around, people are having a lot of troubles being very tactical and, oh, this diet, this movement, this movement. When you connect to the source properly, like all those things fall into place.
Well, because you become aware.
Yeah.
The word enlightenment really means awake.
Yep.
Right? That's what spiritual practice is. It's to become aware of what's holding you back, what's in your shadow or your unconscious, what's controlling you without you realizing it's controlling you. And the fastest way to find that is look at everybody you blame for your problems. My life would be much better if my daddy hadn't done this. If mom and dad had only done this for me or loved me more. I'll never be rich because those people are just lucky. Wherever you have judgments against other people, that's where your unconscious is projecting its own pain outward. So if you just turn those things backwards, remember, for every time you point a finger at somebody else, there's 3 pointing back at you. One of those fingers represents being aware.
Yep.
The other one represents having compassion for yourself and realizing life is not an easy journey. And the other one is making dream affirmative choices. So you have to be aware or you can't be conscious. You're still unconscious. If you don't have compassion for yourself, then you will constantly seek medication to give you the ease of the pain that compassion can do for free.
Yeah.
And compassion looks like, I guess you're really having a tough day today, Paul. You'd really have liked things to be easier today. Yes, I really would have. Well, you'll do better tomorrow because you're more aware today of what you won't do tomorrow so that things go a little better, won't you? Yes, and I make a choice to not do this again tomorrow. That's how you become conscious, and that's how you become an adult, and that's how you create what you want in your life. And if you look right on that poster right there, why don't you read what Albert Einstein had to say?
Yeah. Well, that's definitely...
Great minds always encounter violent opposition from mediocre minds. That means anytime you have a dream, goal, or objective that makes you an individual and does something uniquely your own, you will meet the resistance of everybody else that's insecure, because if you're successful, they're measuring themselves against you, and the biggest challenges are usually right in your house.
Yeah.
Your brothers, your sisters, your mom, dad, aunts, and uncles, because to the degree you're successful, they measure themselves against you. So unfortunately, our families are the first people to try to pull us down into the unconscious, because misery loves company. So Great Spirit built the spirit gym right inside of the family so that we have to become authentically capable of making our own choices and being our own person. And that is the hero's journey. And if you don't take the hero's journey, then you're in jail for the rest of your life doing the job somebody else gave you.
That's pretty badass.
That's the truth.
Yeah.
I've been a therapist for 36 years.
Yeah.
I have coached
Seen
and
everything.
helped thousands of people, and I've seen these patterns repeat themselves.
'Cause they're archetypal, so,
they're
yeah.
archetypal. They're like the sun's going to come up
Yep.
every day.
Yep. And this is one thing I was reading, and I didn't find any material on this, but I think it relates to this. There's this idea with Jung, I think he calls it the circumambulation of the self.
Circumambulation.
Yeah,
of the
I
self,
don't pronounce it.
It means going around the
Yeah.
center.
Yeah, so basically what you're describing is the start of zero, and he says that the way to go towards maximum development is to use your interest to guide you, because you
Yes.
can't see that far, your brain is
That's
not that
the
smart.
heart.
Yeah.
That's choose the option that makes you feel the best.
Yeah. So a couple of things. So let's say we have that in place, and we connect with ourselves, with our heart, with our soul, and we start doing things that we are drawn to naturally.
Yeah.
We start with small things that there's no risks, painting, things like that, and we go forward.
Playing.
What?
Playing. Yeah.
After that, what should people do? Let's say you mentioned going to having a therapist, start providing coaching and guidance on nutrition and things like that.
That would be a Chek professional. We're the only people in the world that have a holistic approach that I've ever seen.
Yeah, maybe starting with your book would be a good idea.
How to eat, move, and be healthy. Yeah, it's a great place to start. But then I've also got my PPS Success Mastery Program, and lesson 1 is how to find and live your legacy, which is your dream.
Yep.
And I take you through the steps of identifying what's getting in the way, what do you have to celebrate, and what values do you want to set for yourself with regard to happiness, diet, movement, and rest, so that you are most efficient at getting there, and what are the 10 key components of any dream that you have to be aware of. Because let's say your dream is to your dream is to be an artist and you get hired by an art firm, but you're not clear where you want to live. And the next thing you know, you've got a job on the North Pole living in sub-zero weathers and there's nobody around, and your job is to create paintings of polar bears, but you find it extremely isolating and you hate cold weather. Well, there's an example. Geography is one of the 10 components of a dream. How much money do you want to make? That's another one. How much responsibility do you want? That's another one, right? You know, without going through the whole list, you see there's 10 key things that if you're not aware of, you might get part of the wish. This is why they say be careful what you wish for, you might get it. Mm-hmm. So my point is that I have coursework that can be done online by anyone around the world anytime, that specifically lesson 1 is how to find and live your legacy, which shows you what I just talked about. Lesson 2 is self-management, how to use your mind to manage yourself effectively, and how to use the science of brainwashing that's been used against you to heal yourself. Lesson 3 is the science of effective goal setting. That's what I call my foundation lessons, because you need to have a sense of how do you know when the compass is tuned. You need to know what stops you from accomplishing what you want mentally, and what are the tricks that are being used against you, so you can be aware of those tricks and use the same science to free yourself. Yeah. And you have to have a science of setting goals, or you don't know how to set up a stepwise procedure for accomplishing anything. If you want to build a house, you have to do it in a certain order. You can't build the roof before you have a foundation, right? Mm-hmm. So without those things in place, very few of which are actually taught in school, you're likely to find yourself with some kind of an addiction to numb the pain of you living the life that you think has been imposed upon you.
And I think with that we can maybe walk through briefly the rest of the doctors.
Well, we did the 4 doctors.
I know, but briefly talk. So when it comes to movement, yeah. I think having a Chek professional to create your personalized training, I've never seen that amount of questions in my life actually. And
the analysis is very comprehensive.
So I think that's there. When it comes to diet, something that helped me a lot, and maybe we can briefly touch upon, is just knowing the amount of protein and carbohydrates. I think metabolic typing is...
Yeah, there's simpler ways. I mean, yes, that helps, but there are simpler ways. Most people don't even need a therapist at the level they're at. All they got to do is exercise. Just do what feels good. That's a simple rule. If the best thing for you to do is walk because running doesn't feel good, then walk, and when you feel inspired to run, run. Mm-hmm. And it might be running for 10 steps, it might be running for 60 seconds, and then you walk until you feel inspired to run, and you'll find as you get fitter, your distance for running grows and your need for walking shrinks. And the next thing you know, you call yourself a runner. If you want to lift weights, then go to the gym. If you can't afford a trainer, then read some books, watch some videos. I've got mountains of videos. The internet's full of stuff. Yep. Do what feels good. In other words, most people don't have to spend money, they just have to take the initiative. Yeah. Once you take the initiative, if then you get stuck, that's a good reason to start spending some money. But the first step doesn't require spending money, it just requires interest, passion, and a willingness to participate in using the powers that you have to create. Or you're just a victim to yourself.
Yeah. And would you say, I will just walk you through some maybe mistakes or things that I've gathered, and let me know what your thoughts are on them. These are kind of tactical. For example, one habit that, the world has is coffee to go through the day. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on that and having something instead?
Well, the thing is that there's a couple of factors to that. Research on addiction to coffee and tea shows that actually it's less the substance and more the ritual. Mm-hmm. And in this world today of high technology and Facebook and Twitter and Twatter and Tweeter and all this other stuff and all this distraction where people have 1,000 fake friends that tell them to get lost and nasty things and never would do that to their face, most people go to a coffee shop where they're sitting with people that they want to talk to, or they're in the energy of people socializing, or they sit at their dinner table or their breakfast table with their spouse or their children. So the research shows that the ritual is actually what's keeping them going, but it just happens in our culture to be centered around coffee and tea. I've never seen a water drinking ritual. I've never seen a milk drinking ritual, but there's lots of coffee, tea, and beer drinking rituals and alcohol drinking rituals, right? So the thing is because that brings us into a place where conversation, connection, and sharing is considered to be the normal environment, oftentimes people that are wanting to get off of coffee actually have a hard time because they're unconscious, as if I stop drinking coffee, then who am I going to talk to in the morning? But what I say is keep the ritual up, just put something different in the cup. And there's other techniques for getting off of coffee, but the key point I'm making is oftentimes it's not the drug, it's the connection that we get through the use of the drug. That's the most important at a human level.
Is the why you're doing that behavior.
What is it that it's really nourishing?
Okay.
Really, and oftentimes it's nourishing our connection for human companionship, human relationship, and a safe place to share our thoughts and feelings, usually with friends. Most people drink coffee with friends and coworkers, so they have common interests.
Yep.
And that allows us to grow together, to learn together, and also to share our pain together, because talking about your pain is a very effective means of decompressing the pain and alleviating it. In fact, Freud was famous for the development of what was called the talking cure, because he found even intractable diseases could heal if you simply allowed people to talk about their feelings.
Impressive.
Then there's ways to get off of it chemically, and the simple thing to do with a coffee addiction is just get just take 12 dark roast coffee beans in your hands. The darker roast, the better, because there's more caramelization of them, so there's more sugar in them, so they taste better. And just eat 3 beans. Instead of drinking coffee, put something else like a decaffeinated tea or even a decaffeinated coffee, which I don't recommend because it still has caffeine in it. But let's just say you switch to a herbal tea, but you're feeling symptoms of withdrawal. So you take 3 coffee beans and you chew them in your mouth as long as you can without swallowing, and you suck the juice out of the coffee bean, and that'll usually knock out the withdrawal symptoms for 1 to 2 hours. And then when you feel the withdrawal symptoms coming on, just chew another 3 beans, and that sends a homeopathic dose of caffeine into the system and tricks it into believing you got your coffee, and your hormonal system begins to upregulate its own production of cortisol to match. You see, when you drink a stimulant, your body upregulates to match the stimulus of the drug, but when you take the stimulus away, your body's become entrained, so it now doesn't produce the cortisol, which is an awakening hormone, without the stimulus of the coffee. So if you reduce the stimulus, then the effect is that you have this hormonal low that makes you feel kind of depressive and lethargic and low energy. So you can use a small enough amount of coffee to trick the system into regulating itself toward normal, but you're actually not getting any kind of a significant dose. You're just making your body believe that it is. And I've never met anyone. I had a lady that was drinking 25 cups of coffee who was able to get off of that. She was doing 25 cups a day.
That's like the equivalent of water.
Yeah, it was very bad. In fact, it was so bad that she had become severely hypothyroid and all her fingernails fell off. She'd seen 10 medical doctors, told every one of them that she drank 6 pots of coffee. It worked out to 25 cups, 5 or 6 pots. It worked out to 25 8-ounce cups of coffee a day when I did the math on it. And not one doctor questioned her about it or thought there was anything wrong with it. Yet here she was taking all sorts of medications because she had burned her adrenals out, become hypothyroid, lost her fingernails, and all her hair was falling out, her eyebrows were gone.
Whoa.
And she's like, and her husband was a medical doctor. And so when she came to me, I'm like, oh, well, I know exactly what's going on, you know? And so first I gave her the immediate solution, but then I had to say, okay, now what is it that the coffee means to you? Because if we take the coffee out of your life without addressing what it means to you, you're just going to find another addiction.
Yeah.
Something else will fall off.
Same with same with smoking, same with other similar behaviors.
All addictions are generally coping strategies. They're forms of acquiring safe love.
Yeah. Yeah. What are your thoughts, and this is something you've talked tremendous amount about, but organic food?
It's extremely important.
Yeah.
Hippocrates said, about 2,700 or more years ago, food is man's best medicine. If you're eating commercially raised food, you're eating animals that have been highly poisoned, drugged, raised in very, very unhealthy, crowded, toxic environments, living in their own feces and urine. When you consider that they allow, for example, cattle can be fed engine oil, dead animal parts, plastic chips, sawdust, and cement powder. Those are all legal to feed in feedlots. You're eating an animal that bioaccumulates that, and any of the toxins the animal cannot detoxify are stored in its fat. So when you're eating any commercially raised plants or animals, you are poisoning yourself with some of the most dangerous chemicals in the world. And now the research shows that Roundup from Monsanto is the most dangerous because it actually wipes out the bacteria in your microbiome, and so you can no longer effectively break foods down and break fiber down, and those bacteria all have a wide diversity of genes that turn out to be necessary for them to do alchemical functions to keep our bodies healthy. So first and foremost, if you're eating commercially raised food, you're eating a highly toxic diet that will poison you and make you very sick. And it'll accumulate in your body and cause all sorts of serious medical problems progressively. Second of all, the nutrient value on average is about 30% less in commercially raised food than it is organic. So what happens is you can't trigger the satiety centers in the brain, because as long as the brain needs nutrient, it'll keep you searching for food. But most people are so detached, they can't tell the urge for vegetables from the urge for soda pop or candy or sugar or coffee. So they get so programmed into eating just a limited number of foods that their nutritional diversity goes down to very narrow, and the body becomes malnourished and starts to break down. And the next thing you know, they're at doctor's office being put on all sorts of drugs, none of which helps address the real issue.
Do you think that's why there's a lot of, there's a lot of vegetarianism for sure, and you do have a podcast series on that was incredibly insightful. Do you think that people have just destroyed this? You might have said this, but people have destroyed the receptors for most of the other stuff, like meat and sugar and all these things. That
No.
Vegetables are the only things that are not. They haven't destroyed that yet.
No, it has not to do with receptors. That's not how it works. What's happening is most people around the world are in so much pain from being told what to do by a god of their own belief, from religion, from authority figures in school, from parental figures, that they have not found a group of people that shares a common ideal. Whenever Jung and many experts like Joseph Campbell and others, and James Hollis and a long list of experts I've studied on mythology, say whenever a culture's myth breaks down, one of the first signs is the emergence of isms. Nazism, skinheadism,
all sort of ideologies.
Rastafarianism, ism, vegetarianism, veganism. Why? Because those isms, the group and the ideology of the group becomes a surrogate parent. And now you're in a group of people that share a common ideal, and it gives you something to fight for, something to live for, but it externalizes the authority figure to the group or to the belief system. So it's no different than being a Christian and thinking that God will burn you in hell for touching your genitals, while the Buddhist sitting right next to you says, well, I got news for you. There is no God up there doing that. You're the only God doing that. And God, if there is one, obviously says yes to everything. Look around.
So you basically replace God with other ideologies.
You replace any authority figure that's threatening with one that's more aligned with what your psyche needs in order to feel connected and safe and part of a movement that has a sense of meaning to you. So veganism and vegetarianism is heavily promoted under the guise of protecting the world and saving the animals, so that a person who's still a child and is entering their warrior archetype to become an individual now has not only something to fight for, but has a group of people that makes them feel safe because there's a common ideology.
Yep.
But they don't realize they're externalizing their own inner authority to the group. And most of those people cannot be healthy on vegetarian diets for a long, long list of reasons. They can for short periods of time, but if you're on a vegetarian diet and you're buying commercial food, you're poisoning yourself while starving yourself for digestible protein.
Yep.
And all the reasons that I talk about in all my courses and my podcast series, which would be way too much to get into here. But the point is, whenever a culture breaks down, or even a family breaks down, if their mythology breaks down, the first thing that people seek is some kind of an ism, and this is where you see gang membership going up. This is where you see people flocking to extremist churches and offshoot religions and vegetarianisms and skinhead type stuff and Nazism and all this stuff. And that ultimately is the step before war, because if you don't, funny thing is, vegetarians are all about loving the earth and saving the animals, but all you got to do is go against their belief system and they'll attack you, just like Christians and Muslims going at each other. So you see that a belief system itself is a closed system, and anything that challenges it from the outside gets attacked, or the system cannot stay intact. So
very interesting.
When you grow up and become spiritually awake, then you maintain an open belief system. And I teach my students, any belief system worth living is worth challenging. Mm-hmm. Because if you don't challenge it, you stagnate your growth. You put your pause button on.
And this is something that I think 2.5 years ago, I had all these, similar to this, and you talk about this in the podcast series, and we're going to have links to, I think there's 2 of them at least?
There's 5 of them. In
5 of them.
Yeah, only one of them's out. The rest of them will be on our new Chekiva.com platform.
Yeah, so we're gonna have links for that. One thing that I am seeing, and especially now where you have a lot of things like that. You have climate change, a lot of things to kind of go out and about and be valued in the world, because
mm-hmm. We need that.
Yeah. So, but what I do feel, and for example, for me, I was avoiding a lot of things in particular, and I was hiding insecurity and fears and kind of weakness behind virtues.
Yes, that's a classic religious tactic.
So it's exactly what you're talking about. It's basically people have all these things that are going on and they're hiding behind.
Yeah, look how many people who have been extreme anti-gay and gone to gay rallies and bashed gays turned out to be closet gays, and were the principals of schools or priests or pastors in churches.
Yeah.
Because that's how the unconscious works. You project anything in your unconscious that you don't want to consciously deal with, or you're afraid to mm-hmm. deal with, because you're afraid of being found out, because it makes you different than other people. So what happens is we project our darkness out onto other people and label it there and attack it. But
we're externalizing weakness, basically.
You externalize your fears, your weaknesses, and your judgments. But when you realize that you're actually going against the truth of the universe is the truth of the universe is oneness and connection. The universe will not support an illusion that is not congruent with the laws of the universe. So whenever you start acting in ways that diminish other people, or damage other people's freedom, or diminishes their free will, or judges them, or creates the illusion of separation, that guy's an asshole because he believes in this or whatever, mm-hmm. you actually now have to provide the energy to maintain that illusion yourself, because the universe will not support it. But when you look at the saints and the sages and the gurus who can go look at how long Mahatma Gandhi could go without food because he had a legitimate cause. Why? Because he was trying to support the entire country of India and uses life as an example of how to live non-violently. So the universe supported that because it's a principle, that's a practice of the unity and the oneness of all. Somebody like that can do things that are seemingly miraculous from a medical perspective because they're inspired and literally breathed by the universe. But people that are practicing ideas and beliefs that are not congruent with the oneness of the universe or with the principle of love have got to provide the energy for that themselves, and they burn out.
Yeah,
and they become sick, unhealthy and unhappy, alone people. And that if you carry that to its extreme, or not even to its extreme, you know, whenever you're judging and separating yourself from others, you're actually practicing a low level of evil. And to the degree that that grows to killing other people or segregating other people, then the evil gets to be bigger and bigger. And so what do you get? If you want to look at what evil looks like, just watch the Creepy Line documentary showing what
corporations and
what Google and Facebook are doing by weaponizing your information, stealing your personal information, and using it to commandeer your mind and swing votes and program you to live in ways that are incongruent. And when you look at, I've seen research showing that 98% of the US population is 2 paychecks from bankruptcy. But when they're using these predatory sales tactics and mind control tactics, they're being completely and utterly disrespectful to what ultimately keeps a country healthy or a world healthy and keeps a economy going for the long run and growing, all for their own self-interest. So if you were to look into the financial interests of Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates and the people behind these large corporations, well, Bill Gates is worth something like $130 or $160 billion. So you're talking about separating the power to the point that there's such a gap between the poor people and the rich people that the poor people don't even have a fighting chance because they're being manipulated at every level of their psyche from every angle because they're using artificial intelligence to monitor their every move. And so we're in a situation where we all have to become conscious of what's not only being done to us, but what we're doing to ourselves by participating unconsciously. And that goes all hand in hand with becoming adults. If we don't become adults and accept responsibility that the world is the garden that we have to garden, or we will cease to exist, then we will video game, drink, drug, and pornography ourselves right into non-existence.
And I think that's a good thing to talk about, because when people look at the Chek Institute, which is actually an acronym for something else, which is really cool.
Corrective Holistic Exercise Kinesiology.
But it's also your name, so it's like very interesting.
Yeah.
I think what you've done, and you were just telling me how 2006 you had to make this decision to stop traveling, even though it could potentially kill your business.
Yeah.
There's right now a lot of talk on this idea of conscious capitalism, which is kind of a tactical, weird thing. What are your thoughts on how should people, because what we are doing now, it's not working. It worked.
No.
It worked in the past 500 years ago.
It works for a few rich people.
Yeah, well, if you're talking about financially, but even systematically in terms of outcomes, because I wouldn't mind not being rich if everything will be really well. How would you, and this might be too long of a discussion, but how would you see if you would be Bill Gates, if you would be in that position of having all the money in the world and access to all these things, how would you envision and how would you push out a better way? Because it's actually not that easy to be able to systematically understand everything and root causes and everything.
It all begins with education and has to start at the level of the children.
So the individuals.
The older a person gets, the more conditioned they are into their behaviors and the less likely they are to change.
Okay.
That's why in science, they say that the leaders of science have to die before new ideas can emerge, because they will not let new ideas. Look, Einstein resisted quantum physics. He did not want quantum physics to be true because, as in his words, he did not believe God played dice. Well, what he was saying is he really wanted his model to reign superior. And I love Einstein. I've studied 3 biographies. I have a bust of him sculpted. I'm only pointing out that we're all susceptible to the natural process of rigidification. Dr. Dan Siegel says the river of mind has 2 banks. One is chaos and one is rigidity. So it takes awareness to stay in the middle, which is an open-minded position.
Yeah.
It means to be consciously ignorant. You could be a professor, you could be an esteemed professor of, say, biomechanics, kinesiology, or medicine, but the day that you believe you know everything and that you know more than other people is the day you have fallen into a belief system that stops your own students from learning how to look for new possibilities. And we're at a time in the world right now where old behaviors and old practices are what got us in trouble. So it's the children, it's the artists, it's the poets, it's the visionaries. It's the people that don't normally get a voice that need to step forward and share their visions, their intuitions. We should take all the militaries and task them with cleaning up the soil, cleaning up the waterways, and cleaning up the skies. We shouldn't be investing billions of dollars a year in weapons to ultimately destroy the entire planet. We've got enough nuclear weapons in the world right now to destroy the entire planet 179 times over. If we go into a third world war, it will be the end of this planet. Why do you want to invest money in weapons when even your own death is guaranteed by using them? We've got 23 or 24 countries with nuclear weapons. The instant we launch a weapon at China, Russia, or any major threat, they will launch them back at us.
Don't you think, sorry for interrupting you, don't you think they're just, because it seems to me they're just tools to avoid the other person attack. Nobody wants to use them, but they have to have them because everybody else has them.
Oh yeah? There's about 500,000 Japanese that'll tell you otherwise, called Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And it might interest you to know that if you do your research, you'll find that they dropped the nuclear bombs after the Japanese had already given up and threw the towel in and said, we lose, we submit.
But
they did it to say, don't mess with us or we'll kill you, to send a message to the world.
Wow.
The human use of power can never be more moral than its own spiritual development. And we, as I've said many times in this interview, culturally are still not more evolved than teenagers at best. In fact, most good research in psychology says the average human adult isn't developed more than about a 12-year-old psychologically.
Wow.
So when you get a guy like Donald Trump, who's really like a flaming 16 or 17-year-old boy with too many toys at his side and an erection that he can't handle, metaphorically, running a country that has as much power as the United States, who wants to keep drilling for oil, who keeps denying that we're having global warming and all this other stuff, we're in a position where all of us has to step forward and create our own democracy because we've lost our democracy. We don't have government anymore. We have corporate headquarters. And that goes right back to Google, Facebook, military-industrial complex, food manufacturers, drug manufacturers. I mean, I could get into so many rabbit holes. All you got to do is study the work of Noam Chomsky. He lays it out like nobody's business. Like, when you look at the work of Noam Chomsky, he shows you exactly how they do it, why they're doing it, and it's always for profit and for power. It has nothing to do with your well-being. Look at our medical system. We have the most expensive, most useless medical system probably in the world for anything except emergency medicine.
Like breaking a leg or...
If you get hit by a car, go to the hospital. But if you have anything else wrong with you, you're better off in almost any country in the world than you are in the United States. Here they will rack the bills up through the roof, they'll drug you to death, and they won't even look for the actual cause of the problem because then you're not profitable anymore. So if you take our banking system, our outdated education system that was built on a model developed by plantation owners to teach slaves not to think for themselves and to do what they were told, and we now have an education system programming us not to think, not to be creative and take responsibility for our creative ability, but to follow the lead of authority. So you've got the education system, the banking system, you've got the military, you've got the medical system, you've got the transportation system, which could be upgraded. You've got the energy systems. We're using fossil fuels and outdated technologies. There's zero-point energy technologies that have been around for a long time that they keep confiscating the patents or killing the people that invent the technologies. In other words, what I'm saying is we have enough genius amongst the population that if we start working together and we get together like Italy did, the Italian people resisted this mandatory vaccination stuff and all the stuff the government was doing, and 1 million people stormed the parliament and kicked the government out.
Yep.
Well, we're right on the edge where we've got to say, look, we don't want to be controlled by artificial intelligence. We don't want to be controlled by corporations. We want our children to be healthy. We want freedom of speech. And if you study the documentary, I told you the creepy line, they show you how they're actually eliminating choice. They're knocking out anybody like Dr. Mercola and people like myself and anybody else that's teaching you to think for yourself. They make you invisible so people can't find you. That's not a democracy. If you don't have diversity in farming, you die. If you don't have diversity in nature, you die. If you don't have diversity in culture, you die. If you don't have diversity in politics, you make narrow decisions based on too little information. If you don't have diversity in finance, you're in trouble. What's happening is we're narrowing diversity down so the money and the power flows into the hands of a very few people that are ultimately controlling your destiny and your health and your vitality and your future and that of the planet. And it's the young people who aren't trapped in these belief systems that actually are the prophets that will be the ones that can see beyond the limitations of older people, that can, look, it was Mark Zuckerberg developed Facebook in school. Bill Gates was developing computers when he was a kid, so was Steve Jobs. These guys were the visionaries of their day, but unfortunately, power got the best of them, as it often does. But we're in a situation right now where all the genius children and all the genius teenagers and young people of the world have got to take up the warrior's staff, step forward and say, look, we've got to heal this planet. We can't do it the way you did, Mom and Dad. We can't have another world war. We can't keep poisoning people in the name of medicine. We can't keep killing people off and giving them autism with pseudo vaccinations that may actually be weapons of population control. There's a lot of serious looking into that idea, and I don't want to sidetrack our conversation. Yep. But the point is, we're at a point now where we've put nature so out of balance. The oceans are poisoned, the waterways are poisoned, the skies are poisoned. We've ruined the soil with scientifically validated chemical farming. I mean, science has now become the modern prostitute to anybody that'll pay them to say anything they want to say. I've got a friend who's an agent for the FDA who's regularly busting medical doctors that are writing bogus research studies to promote and approve drugs, and the studies have never been done. They're all manufactured and published in medical journals as scientific fact. We don't have morality in science. We don't have morality in the newspaper. We've got a few people that control the whole stream of media. We've got a few people controlling your phones. We've got a few people that can control whether your voice is heard, whether your website is seen. This is
it's a big problem.
A very big problem. But the point that I'm making is it's the young people that have got to do it because they're not trapped in the belief system and they've got enough energy to make changes. But if we're not careful, they'll have them all so drugged that it's checkmate.
Okay, and I think that's because the problem, a lot of people are especially now aware of the problem. If you look at other people that have been, some of them have been attacked massively, some of them have been taken out, especially if you're looking at social media bans and things like that and freedom of speech. If you look at people like Jordan Peterson that had...
That's a perfect example.
Yeah.
Jordan Peterson's somebody that should be put on mainstream television and have his own show that should be government sponsored, because he doesn't claim to know all the answers, but he's got a deep enough level of knowledge of psychology and how life really works that there's an example of somebody that we should be working to get more voice, to get more power, because he's educating people in truth. Not his truth, but in the truth of how life works and how relationship works.
Yeah.
And there's many other people. We've had many of them, and look what happened. Martin Luther King, dead.
Yep. Just yesterday was Martin Luther King Day.
Day,
2 days ago. 2 days ago.
And Abraham Lincoln dead. John F. Kennedy dead. Anybody that really stood up for the people disappears.
So what do you think is the way around it? Because
do it together.
Do it together. Because now I think what we have is we have these these tools of network amplification that are basically distributing power in the hands of people. So that's a major advantage.
Yes.
Because if we actually are putting things together in the right way, the collective would overcome the
We can
singular.
use the same technology that's being used against us
Yeah.
to solve the problem.
So would you focus, you said something, and I just want to clarify if that's what you said. So you would focus on helping the young
Yes.
with education and health
And awareness.
and awareness.
Look at
So you empower them to then solve all the problems in the future.
Well,
Okay.
we empower them to do the creative work to help us identify the solutions to the problems that seem unsurmountable.
Because we're so blocked in
And
our way of
then
thinking. And
they help us see the picture so that other people can see the rationale behind it and then be brave enough to get involved because the solutions that they come up with are clearly better than the ones we're using.
yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean there's not wise adults around at any age that aren't trapped in belief systems. You know, I could sit here and list names. Look at Eckhart Tolle, look at Deepak Chopra, look at the Dalai Lama, look at Ken Wilber. I mean, the list is very long. It's just that those people are pushed into the background. Look at Rupert Sheldrake.
Yep.
Rupert Sheldrake told the truth about science on TED and they banned his talk. 2 million people reacted to that. Why? Because they didn't want the truth being cut out. And Graham Hancock got banned from TED for sharing the truth about psychedelic medicines and a variety of everything. So you see what's happening is we don't actually have a democracy. We've got a fascist country, and many do, but it's being put across as the illusion of freedom. I have a buddy who was a world champion in weightlifting in Russia. And I've lectured in Russia and spent time with him, and he's been to the United States many times, and he said to me one day something profound. He said, Paul, I come from the days of communism.
Where we knew it was communism.
And he said, Americans just think they're free. They don't know how trapped they are. He said, I know when I'm free. You guys are all caught in a very dangerous illusion. So you see, what's my point? Somebody who comes from a completely different political system and a different set of values and a different way of looking at things can look into our culture and see the disease easily because they're not blinded by it. So if we work together and get the genius of around the people around the world, Brazilian people will see different things in our culture than Americans will. Chinese people will see different things. Hindu people will see different things. We need to stop. We got to get rid of all this ethnocentric religion, which is my group against your group. We've got to get rid of racial differences, and we've all got to say we are a human family. We all depend on the earth. We all depend on the water. We all breathe the same air. We all wear human bodies, and we all have the same needs and the interests. And we all know right now we have the power to completely destroy ourselves. And interestingly, Jung said, no man is fully alive until he has the power to destroy himself, and here we are. So today's the day.
Here we are.
Here we are with the power to utterly destroy ourselves, and there's two ways to do it. Be passive and let the people that are already engineering it keep going with their teenage hard-on and foolishness and power-mongering, or get involved and thrive, because now it's the chance to be highly creative. In fact, somebody who speaks on this beautifully is a medical doctor named Zach Bush, Z-A-C-H Bush, and he's got a phenomenal interview on Gaia TV on the show Healing Matrix, interviewed by Sue Morter, and it just came out recently. So if you go to Gaia TV, Healing Matrix show, season 4,
Yep.
Zach Bush, MD, he addresses everything we're talking about so beautifully. I was damn impressed, and I reached out to him right away to see if I could get a podcast with him, and I want to help promote what he's saying, because he's a medical doctor that's looked at this stuff inside out and backwards. He realizes that the future is the children, and that we need to educate the children because they're open-minded. And I'll give you a simple example you'll be familiar with, I suspect. When they take children and adults and try to teach them spoon bending by using your mind to bend a spoon, children can do it in as little as a few minutes quite often, but adults often cannot do it at all, get frustrated and give up. Why? Because they've been programmed to believe by Newtonian science and scientific materialists who run our education system that you can never bend steel with your mind, yet kids that don't have any of those blocking beliefs do it and think, what's the big deal? You see, the kids don't actually have limiting beliefs to stop them from coming up with ideas for cleaning the oceans, getting the plastic, using other materials. And we've got all these geniuses that are trying to find out what they're here to do in the world. That's what they're here to do. Add some love and add some creativity to the world. And when the adults get out of the way and pay attention to the fact that there's genius all around them and start listening instead of telling them what they shouldn't be doing, we'll heal.
And would you, kind of a tactical question, would you focus on soon-to-be moms to educate their kids, or would you focus on kids?
I would focus on children, but I would also focus...
Because kids are too young to kind of, because their parents around them, like how would you...
Well, I would focus on the kids being at the level of school, starting
like 13, 12.
We need to rehabilitate the entire education system and get the telling kids what is and isn't out of the way, because a lot of the stuff we're teaching kids is 100 years behind. I mean, if you look at science, it's antiquated. If you look at imposing religious ideals on people in school, we shouldn't be teaching people that they have to practice a given religion. I mean, an example of that is there was a huge lawsuit here in Encinitas because one of the public schools in Encinitas put a yoga program so that the people could have healthier bodies because of all the unhealthy kids. And it's non-impact, it's stretching, you know, all the benefits of yoga. Well, they got sued like crazy by a Christian family saying that the school was imposing a religious idea on their children. Well, yoga isn't a religion.
It's just
First of all, it's a practice of healthy living. And so there you see a 2,000-year-old mythology that's used as a weapon to stop children from having what they want because it's a belief system that's closed and attacks anything else. We've got to, if we're going to teach belief systems like religion, we need to teach all the world religions so the kids can make up their own mind. And then we have to throw in spirituality that says, here's the principles of living and loving well. You make up your own philosophy, and life will let you know how well it's working.
Well, I'm trying to wrap my head around this because this is something I'm very interested in personally. A lot of really smart people are interested in this. A lot of really smart people.
Well, because they're aware of what's happening.
It's just not obvious how you would go about solving these things, and actually, because the structures that these people have built are so robust and defensible.
Defensive.
Defensible is like it's hard to break. It's like, God, how am I able to crack that, right? So it's very, because if you're going to try to change, and that's what you're doing, for example, with your company, like if you would be able, I'm not sure exactly if this is the case, but in the US it might not be, I'm not sure people can pay with insurance for what you're doing. They can't, right?
No.
So if they would, that would...
Sometimes they can, depends on the insurance policy, because they have insurance policies that'll pay for massage
like
and personal training, kind of a wellness approach.
But if that would be the case, wouldn't that 20x your demand? That would definitely 20x you.
It could, but the problem is they pay peanuts, and most of the Czech professionals know their value. So I had to sell my physical therapy clinic because the insurance companies were ripping us off so bad I couldn't even make a living. So I had to just shut it down and go into cash pay, and then the people that really wanted to heal came up with the cash and my business boomed. But, genius is innate in every one of us. There's no such thing as a child, in my opinion, that doesn't have a genius. The problem is their parents tell the child what they should and shouldn't do instead of fostering their genius. That's why I use the example of the kid playing video games specifically, because a lot of parents don't want kids playing a lot of video games because it's a distraction. But what I'm saying is, if the kid's so-called distraction happens to be their passion, and you can say, well, let's go just beyond playing video games, let's invent one. And turn that into an exploration. And mom and dad take them to a class on basic computer programming and game theory. And the next thing you know, what turned out to be a distraction that was a passion now turns out to be something extremely exciting. And that same technology can turn out to be useful in other areas. Look, we use game theory all over the place, for example. I mean, game theory is everywhere. Why? Because life itself is a game. It really is.
Yeah, that's what the video games are doing, basically.
Yeah, if God is God, then God is unconditional love, and that means everything is fun. War is fun. Loving is fun. Fighting is fun. Why? Because, look, we play football, we beat each other up, no problem.
By fun, you mean there's an inherent reward in all those things?
It means that the only way God can experience what it is to experience all of its potentials, the light and the dark. You can't know one without the other. You can't know light without dark, or north without south, or east without west, or up without down.
Yeah.
Consciousness needs polarity, or there's no awareness.
Yeah.
You understand?
Yeah.
That's why I said consciousness is psychic substance produced not blindly, but in living awareness of opposites. So what are we dealing with? We're dealing with people that want to control us. The opposite is freedom. That gives us a chance to become conscious. The game is get yourself freedom. How do you do it? You can't do it alone. You work together. Right? How did Gandhi do it? He got the whole country of India behind him, and he said, if they beat you up, don't fight back. He had to do it with millions of people, billions actually. So the better the game, the more it inspires participation, right? And a game is played anywhere there's rules and a world. And according to James Carse, who wrote the book Finite and Infinite Games, a world is created whenever there's a witness and a field. So if you have a field and you're playing soccer, then you have rules, you have a place of engagement, and if you have a witness and you call it soccer, there's a world, the world of soccer, the world of video games, the world of medicine, the world of industry, the world of warfare, the world of mothering, the world of school, right? And so within those worlds is the trial and error that brings us into awareness of what works, what doesn't work, what creates freedom, what doesn't create freedom, what creates health, what doesn't create health. If we just take the geniuses and give them all their voice, you will find people that come from, look, one of the ways they found they can clean oil out of the ocean is by using bacteria. That means that a biologist figured that out, not not an oil scientist, not some entrepreneur trying to sell more oil. It took somebody in left field. So if we say, okay, let's get clear on what the problems are that we're all facing that are very stressful and forcing a lot of us into the stress of drinking too much and burying our head in useless television and hiding like ostriches with their head in the sand. Okay, let's take this as a chance to be creative together. Let's fall in love with each other. Let's realize that we gotta love this planet because she gives us life and we're killing her. If we then say, okay, to the kids that love to be out in nature, here's the problems we need to solve together. Just like we say to the little boy, it's fun to play games, but let's learn to build one so that it becomes productive. And so you actually get something in return from it instead of just lost time and pumping money into someone else's pocket. If we put all the problems on the table and say, okay, everybody, here's our collective challenge together. We either fix these problems or we die. How's that for motive? Mm-hmm. Okay. And then we don't put an age limit on it. I mean, I saw an interview with a 13-year-old kid who was a math genius who was already studying very advanced level quantum physics, and he was actually at a robotics seminar, and he won this robotics. It was a science fair, and he won it. But they were interviewing about all kinds of things, and he was saying, you know, he even was brave enough to say, I think most people's ideas of religion are just outdated old programming, and they're not congruent with what we know in quantum physics. And he was quoting all sorts of advanced math and things to back his points. Now, 99% of the adults didn't understand this 13-year-old. But what I'm saying is that 13-year-old also needs to stand right next to Jordan Peterson. And so do all the other kids that have good ideas who are great artists. I have a friend who's got an 8-year-old granddaughter. I swear to God, her art is mind-blowingly good. So she may be a visionary. So we take these kids and teenagers and people in universities and the young minds that aren't so boxed and say we all have a common problem and we solve it together and we make it fun and interesting, or we just give up and let fascism take over and we all become pawns to artificial intelligence and robots and we drink, drug, and kill ourselves or commit suicide.
Yeah, God. Yeah, I'm not even, I have so many thoughts on that, but I think none of them are needed. One quote that I found interesting from this biologist that I think is a world expert on ants, his name is James Wilson, you might be aware of him. He worked very closely with Watson, who discovered the DNA back in the 40s, I think. He said, the real problem of humanity is the following. We have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. And it is terrifyingly dangerous and is now pointing a point of crisis overall. This is 54 or something, like 70 years ago.
Well, Jung was warning us. Steiner said around 1897 this: man will continue to invent technologies outside of himself until he either destroys the world or realizes all the technologies that he's creating are copies of what's inside of himself.
So psychic representations of...
The question is, will he destroy the world before he figures it out?
Okay.
Okay, so if you study the mystics, you study the yogis, you study the shaman, and you look at the documentaries available, you study the Aboriginal people who were able to communicate with each other thousands of miles away with no phones just by focusing their intention, and they called it song lines. They knew how the energy lines move through the earth. I mean, I could give you a long expose. You have to say to yourself, who built the pyramids? We don't have the technology today to move 100-ton blocks of stone and build pyramids with such precision you can't even put a feeler gauge between the gaps that are watertight. I mean, those technologies mean there's other intelligences in the universe interacting with us, and we have to start paying attention to that.
Do you think they did it enough human-like so that we're not...
That's what, yes, they did that. So
like it's almost like comprehensible.
You can look at the series called The Law of One by Ra, and it explains exactly how they were built. But the point that I'm making is we have all sorts of opportunities, and if people would just stop playing silly games and say, well, instead of saying aliens aren't real, let's invite them to help us. And of course, people get all scared and say, well, what if they destroy us? And I say,
but most of the population would just freak out if that happens today,
well, the point is that because they're afraid. But I say, look,
it's better to face all those things than avoid all those things.
We've barely been able to get to the moon and a few other distant planets. If you have the technology to completely travel interdimensionally and intergalactically, you've already experimented with forms of power far beyond our nuclear capabilities, so you must have the morality to know how to use them, or you would have killed yourself a long time ago. So all I'm saying is the chances that aliens are going to be threatening to us is silly, because we're like crying little babies compared to them. They're like probably giggling at us. Look at these guys are killing themselves with ancient nuclear technologies, and they can't even figure out how the pyramids were built, right? Yeah. Meaning ancient to them,
I know,
right?
I know.
And I'm saying all you got to do is look at the pyramids and many other things. I could cite, watch Greg Braden's show on Gaia, Missing Links, and he shows you all the things science doesn't want you to know about because they can't explain it. Like, how do you explain coal miners a mile deep in the earth finding a computer chip embedded in coal that's been there for about 2 million years, and it's a computer chip that's as advanced or more advanced than ours? And there's a long list of these things. So when you start...
This is the show you mentioned?
No, this is a different show.
Okay.
Greg Braden.
The Missing Links.
Missing Links.
Okay, good.
On Gaia.
Okay, so we're going to have
And it's all about the missing links, right? And what science is covering up. So to who? The old guard who wants to maintain the status quo, to keep you programmed to keep buying all their garbage and believing in their story, which is what's taught in school.
Yeah.
For example, I think it was John Wheeler, if I remember right, was discussing that if you, as a scientist student in a university, want to study any cosmology concept that goes outside of biblical cosmology, no major universe will give you a grant to fund it. You'll have to go to a third world university like Grenada. But if you go outside of the beliefs of Christianity and try to figure out how the universe got here or what God is, and it doesn't fit Christian cosmology, nobody will fund you. So this is the kind of crap we got to get rid of. We got to say, hey, let's figure it out, man. Let's make it fun. get rid of all the belief systems. Let's reinvent the whole thing and find something that brings us together, not only in love and respect for each other, but in love and respect for the planet, and realize that we are part of a universe so vast that it's mind-boggling, and that our own ideas are actually becoming impediments to our growth. And there you see, we have to open the belief systems, and we have to be, we have to honor our ignorance as citizens of a universe, not thinking that we're the controllers of a world that was never ours to control, because look what we did to it controlling it, and look what we've done to each other. This is the time to get creative. This is the time to listen to all the mystics that religions tried to kill, who said, God is everything. You are God. You're looking at God. God's not some idea who's going to burn you in hell. That's silliness. You know, St. Francis of Assisi, when people kept asking him how to find God, he said, what you are looking for is what's looking. What you are looking for is what's looking, right? Well, teach that to kids. Not that they're going to burn in hell for touching their genitals, when that's normal when you're going through puberty. I mean, if you don't play with your own genitals, you never know yourself. I mean, so we've got all these antiquated mythologies and belief systems that keep us trapped and putting our nose down to things that aren't important, while people that have a lot of money and power play dangerous games
to keep their money and power.
To keep their money and power, and keep us pacified with fancy phones and technologies that are brainwashing us into spending money we don't have, and living in ways that are not healthy for the planet or each other.
Yeah.
So it's time to we have to do it.
At the individual level.
We have to do it at the individual level, but you talked about a man that was an expert on ants. When they study how ants work, they find that there's almost no intelligence in one ant, but you put 10,000 of them together and they do miracle things. One nerve cell in your brain doesn't have a lot of intelligence, but you put 3 billion of them together and you've got a supercomputer, right? So no one of us has enough intelligence to deal with the challenges, but if you put 7 billion of us together with a common objective, we will create a super brain, and we already have the neural connections in place. It's called the internet. We just got to now get the internet free of all the trickery, so that we can put all the ideas on the table.
Yeah.
And then get wise people like Jordan Peterson, Deepak Chopra, and anybody that's wise like the Dalai Lama to oversee the filtration process with moral principles guiding us. A moral, by definition, is a code of conduct that is life affirmative. An ethic is a code of conduct that may or may not be life affirmative. When I was a paratrooper in the 82nd Airborne Division, I had a soldier's manual that told me exactly who to kill and what to do with them. That's not moral, unless it's really protecting your life. But when I found out the military is being used by rich people as a sword to steal things, to control other people, I said I can't participate in this. I joined the military on the honest intention of acting morally, to use force only to protect people when it was absolutely necessary to do it, not to go into the Middle East, steal them, screw their societies up, and take over their resources. And this is the kind of behavior that we have with Donald Trump and company, and others like him. And all I'm saying is we aren't going to solve these problems until we get clear on the moral ground rules of science, and the moral ground rules of relationships, and the moral ground rules of how we should farm, and how we should do medicine, and how we should raise children, and how we should educate children, and how we should care for each other. If we don't have a moral filter, we will just destroy each other in the name of trying to solve a problem, because everybody will say, my idea is right, screw you.
Okay. And the way to do that is put people together and get them to
take the geniuses in every field that are open-minded, honest, and willing to donate their life to solving the big problems at hand, and publicly fund them. Yeah. And stop pumping money into military, take all the defense systems and say we don't need them because we're all one family. We've got a problem that we all have to solve, or these war games aren't going to matter anyhow. Take all the large corporations like Google and create a public fund that supports food delivery and water delivery and rehabilitation of the soils and the environment, instead of all these people having enough money that they could never spend it anyhow and creating a huge divide in the economy. And then we actually all become incorporated into the one game called life.
Beautiful.
And we share the resources and we share the income, and certainly there can be perks for people that are the inventors or whatever to keep them inspired. But really, what is a guy like Bill Gates going to do with 130 or 160 billion dollars?
Well, obviously not a lot, because he's donating most
well,
of
but
it.
a lot of the stuff he's donating to has actually got ulterior motives that are not healthy. All you got to do is look into all this stuff. The
It
whole
looks
thing's
very healthy, but yeah.
It's an illusion. I mean, that's how do you think? These are the masters of illusion, right? There's a, listen carefully. The word television means tell a vision. And when you own the television channel, you tell the vision
visions
you want them to believe.
Yeah.
And when you have kids raised learning on screens, televisions, they don't know the difference between the truth and lies. So we've got to get morality so that the vision we're telling is bringing us together and making clear what the challenges are that we have to solve for the planet and for our own survival. And that is the hero's journey. And that's when we all get to become spiritual. That's when we all get to become adults. And that's when we all have to decide we're either part of the problem or part of the solution. If you're part of the problem, your future doesn't look good.
So that's the ultimate collective meta dream, basically.
And that's when all the ants get together and create a brain.
Yeah, yeah.